If you're 65 or older, receiving Social Security and still working, listen carefully, because one simple mistake could leave you with hundreds of dollars less in your expected benefits, and the mistake is surprisingly easy to make. You're earning more from work than you realize while collecting Social Security before reaching full retirement age. You may think, I'm allowed to work, so what's the problem? And you're right, you are allowed to work. But here's the part many retirees don't realize. Before full retirement age, your earnings can affect how much Social Security you actually receive. That means you could pick up extra hours, take a part-time job, do freelance work, or earn money from a side business, and then discover that part of your Social Security benefits is being withheld. And with September approaching, this is the time to check your numbers, not after your payment changes. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what this one mistake is, who needs to worry about it, how the earnings limit works, and what you should check right now to avoid an unexpected surprise. So if you're 65 plus, collecting Social Security and still working, don't skip this video. Now, before I go any further, let me tell you why I'm even making this video in the first place. Over the last few weeks, my inbox has been flooded with messages from people just like you, retirees, spouses of retirees, sons and daughters trying to help their aging parents make sense of a check that suddenly looked smaller than it should. And when I started digging into what was actually happening to these folks, I realized it wasn't fraud. It wasn't some SSA conspiracy. It wasn't even bad luck. It was one simple, honest mistake made over and over again by people who had absolutely no idea they were making it. And that's the scary part. You don't get a warning light. You don't get a pop-up on your phone. You just get a smaller deposit one month, and by the time you notice, the damage is already done. So let's talk about it plainly, the way I'd explain it to my own mother if she were sitting across the kitchen table from me right now, because that's really what this channel is about. I'm not here to scare you for the sake of getting clicks. I'm here because Social Security is confusing on purpose sometimes, not because anyone's out to get you, but because the rules were written by committees decades ago and updated in little patches ever since, and nobody ever sat down and explained it to regular people in plain English. That's the gap I'm trying to fill here on John Retires, and I'm really glad you're here with me today. Let's start with the big one, the mistake that trips up more people than almost anything else, and it has to do with working while you're collecting benefits. Here's the thing a lot of folks don't realize. You're allowed to claim Social Security retirement benefits before you reach what's called full retirement age, and you're also allowed to keep working. Nobody tells you that you have to quit your job to start collecting. In fact, plenty of people do both at once, especially if they retired from a career job but picked up part-time work, or they're running a small side business, or they're doing consulting on the weekends. All of that is completely legal, and honestly, a lot of retirees need that extra income just to keep up with the cost of groceries these days. But here's where it gets tricky, and this is the mistake I want you to burn into your memory today. If you haven't yet reached your full retirement age and you're earning above a certain limit, the Social Security Administration is going to start withholding part of your benefit. Not because you did anything wrong, not because you broke any laws. It's just built into the system, and if you don't know the number, you can blow right past it without even realizing it. For this year, if you won't reach full retirement age at any point during the year, that limit sits right around $24,480. Once your earnings cross that line, Social Security starts holding back $1 of your benefit for every $2 you earn above it. Now, if you're going to reach full retirement age sometime this year, the number is much more generous. It jumps up to around $65,160. And above that threshold, they only hold back $1 for every $3 you earn. Once you actually hit full retirement age, this rule disappears completely. You could earn $1 million a year at that point, and it wouldn't touch your Social Security check one bit. Now, here's the part that really gets people. A lot of folks hear withheld and think that money's gone forever, like it just vanishes into thin air. That's actually not true, and I want to be fair, tell you the full picture. When Social Security withholds benefits because of the earnings test, they don't keep that. Now here's the part that really gets people. A lot of folks hear withheld and think that money's gone forever, like it just vanishes into thin air. That's actually not true, and I want to be fair, tell you the full picture. When Social Security withholds benefits because of the earnings test, they don't keep that money. Once you hit full retirement age, your monthly benefit actually gets recalculated upward to make up for what was held back. So technically, over a long enough retirement, you often do get that money back in the form of a slightly bigger check for the rest of your life. But here's why this still matters so much, and why I call it a mistake, even though it's not a permanent loss. Most retirees are living paycheck to paycheck, month to month. And if you were counting on that full deposit to cover your mortgage, your medications, your car payment, and it suddenly comes in hundreds of dollars lighter than you expected, that's not a hypothetical problem. That's a real crunch you're feeling right now in your bank account. You can't pay your electric bill with a promise that you'll get it back eventually. So even though the money technically isn't lost forever, the mistake of not knowing this rule can absolutely wreck your monthly budget without any warning. And here's a sneaky twist that catches even more people off guard. This earnings test isn't just about your paycheck from a job. If you're self-employed, if you're running a little shop, doing freelance work, driving for a rideshare app, selling things online, all of that counts as earnings too. I've heard from people who thought they were being smart by picking up gig work to supplement their Social Security, only to get a letter months later saying they'd been overpaid and now owe money back. Imagine working hard, doing everything right in your mind, and then getting a bill from the government telling you that you now have to pay some of it back. That's not a hypothetical scare story, friends. That happens to real people every single year. And it's almost always because nobody explained the earnings limit to them clearly before they started working. So if there's one thing I want you to take away from the first half of this video, it's this. If you're collecting Social Security and you haven't yet reached full retirement age, and you're working in any capacity, whether that's a regular job, a side hustle, self-employment, anything that brings in income, you need to know exactly where that earnings limit sits this year. And you need to keep a close eye on your total income throughout the year, so you're not blindsided. It takes 5 minutes to check, and it could save you from a very unpleasant surprise. Now, let's talk about another mistake that's closely related to this one, and it has to do with reporting changes to Social Security. A lot of people think of Social Security like it's a subscription service. You sign up once, and then the checks just keep coming automatically without you ever having to think about it again. That's not quite how it works. Social Security expects you to report certain changes in your life, and if you don't, that's where things start to go sideways. If your income changes significantly, if you move to a new address, if your marital status changes, if you're receiving other benefits that overlap, all of these things can affect your Social Security payments, and it's on you to let them know. I know that sounds like a hassle, and honestly, it kind of is, but the alternative is so much worse. When Social Security eventually catches a discrepancy between what you reported and what actually happened, they don't just quietly adjust your future checks. They calculate what's called an overpayment, meaning they believe they've paid you more than you were entitled to, and then they come looking for that money back. And friends, I need you to hear this part clearly, because it's honestly one of the most stressful things that can happen to a retiree on a fixed income. When Social Security determines there's been an overpayment, they have the authority to start withholding a significant portion of your future checks until that debt is paid off. For some people, that means their monthly benefit gets cut dramatically, sometimes almost in half, sometimes even more, for months or years at a time, all to pay back money that they may not have even realized they weren't supposed to keep. Can you imagine planning your entire monthly budget around a certain number and then suddenly that number drops because of a mistake you didn't even know you made? That's not just an inconvenience. That's the kind of thing that can push someone into real financial hardship, especially if they're already stretched thin. The good news is this is almost entirely preventable. If something in your life changes, income, address, marital status, living situation, whether you're now caring for a dependent, whether you've started or stopped working, the fix is simple. You report it. You don't wait for Social Security to figure it out on their own, because, trust me, eventually they will, and it's always better to be the one who brings it to their attention first. It shows good faith, and in a lot of cases, it prevents the overpayment from ever happening in the first place. Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about something that catches a lot of higher income retirees completely off guard, and that's the connection between your income and your Medicare premiums. A lot of people don't realize that Social Security and Medicare are more connected than they think. If your income crosses certain thresholds, and I'm talking about your income from a couple of years prior, not even your current income, you can end up paying significantly more for Medicare Part B and Part D. This is sometimes called an income-related monthly adjustment, and it can catch people completely by surprise, especially if they had one unusually high income year, maybe from selling a house, cashing out an investment, or taking a large withdrawal from a retirement account. 2 years later, that one-time bump in income shows up as a much higher Medicare premium, and it can feel like getting punished for something you did years ago without even realizing there'd be a consequence down the road. Here's why this matters so much when we're talking about your Social Security check specifically. In most cases, your Medicare premiums are automatically deducted directly from your Social Security payment before it even hits your bank account. So if your premium jumps up because of an income-related adjustment, you don't get a separate bill in the mail that you can plan around. You just see your Social Security deposit shrink, sometimes by a noticeable amount. And if you don't know why, it feels like your benefits got cut for no reason at all. The truth is, they didn't get cut, your Medicare costs went up, and that increase came straight out of the same pot. If this happens to you and you believe it's connected to a one-time event, like a home sale or a special circumstance, there are ways to appeal that adjustment, but a lot of retirees don't even know that option exists, so they just quietly accept a smaller check every month without ever questioning it. Let's talk about another mistake that surprises people every single year around tax season, and that's the taxation of Social Security benefits themselves. A lot of folks grow up hearing that Social Security is somehow tax-free, that it's your money coming back to you, so why would the government tax it again? Unfortunately, that's not entirely true, and depending on your total income, including other retirement income, part-time wages, investment income, and more, a portion of your Social Security benefit can absolutely be subject to federal income tax. For some retirees, up to 85% of their benefit ends up being taxable. The mistake here isn't that the tax exists, because honestly, there's not much you can do to change the law. The mistake is not planning for it. Some retirees choose to have taxes withheld directly from their Social Security check throughout the year, kind of like a paycheck, so they're not hit with a giant tax bill all at once in April. Others skip that step entirely, assume everything's fine, and then get blindsided every single spring by a tax bill they didn't budget for. If you've never looked into whether you should be having taxes withheld from your benefit, that's absolutely something worth doing before the year gets much further along. Now, I want to shift into something a little more hopeful because I don't want this video to feel like doom and gloom the whole way through. There's actually a huge, and I mean huge, positive change that happened recently that a lot of retirees still don't know about. And if this applies to you, it could mean real money in your pocket. For years, there were 2 rules on the books that reduced or completely eliminated Social Security benefits. For people who also received a pension from a job that didn't pay into Social Security, things like certain teachers, firefighters, police officers, and other public sector workers, these rules were incredibly unpopular and honestly incredibly confusing because they penalize people for having worked in public service. Well, those rules were repealed. If you or someone you love spent a career as a teacher, a police officer, a firefighter, or in another public sector job, and you were told your Social Security benefit would be reduced or eliminated because of your pension, I need you to go check on this right now because you may be entitled to a benefit increase, and in some cases, a retroactive payment covering money you were owed but never received. This is one of those quiet changes that doesn't always make the front page, but it can mean thousands of dollars for the right person, and I don't want a single person watching this video to miss out on it simply because nobody told them. Let's also talk quickly about the cost of living adjustment because this is something that changes every single year and it's easy to lose track of. Social Security benefits increase most years to help keep up with rising prices, and this year's adjustment came in at 2.8%. For the average retiree, that works out to roughly $56 more per month, bringing the average checkup to somewhere around $2,071. Now, I know that might not sound like life-changing money, and honestly, a lot of retirees feel like these increases never quite keep pace with what things actually cost at the grocery store or the pharmacy, and that's a fair frustration to have. But here's the mistake I see people make with this one. They assume the increase just happens automatically and they don't need to check anything. And for the most part, that's true. The deposit does update on its own. But you should still watch for your official notice, which usually arrives by mail or shows up in your online account because that notice will confirm your exact new benefit amount. And if there's ever a discrepancy between what you expected and what you actually received, that notice is your paper trail to go back and question it. Now, let's talk about something a little different, something that isn't exactly a rule you might break by accident, but a danger that preys on the very confusion we've been talking about this whole video. Scammers know that Social Security rules are confusing. They know that seniors are worried about losing benefits, and they use that fear as a weapon. If you ever get a phone call, an email, or even a text message claiming to be from the Social Security Administration telling you that your benefits are about to be suspended, that there's a problem with your account, that you need to verify your information immediately or pay some kind of fee to keep your payments coming, I want you to stop right there and recognize it for what it is. That is not how Social Security operates. They do not call you out of the blue demanding immediate payment. They do not threaten you with arrest over the phone. They do not ask for gift cards, wire transfers, or cryptocurrency to fix a problem with your account. If you ever get a call like that, hang up, and if you want to verify anything about your actual account, the safest way to do it is to create your own personal online account directly through the official Social Security website, where you can see your real earnings record, your real benefit amount, and any real notices, without relying on some stranger on the phone telling you what's wrong. Speaking of that online account, let me tell you why setting one up, if you haven't already, might be one of the single most useful things you do all year. Having direct access to your own Social Security information means you're not waiting for a letter to arrive in the mail, you're not depending on rumors from a neighbor or a headline you saw somewhere. You can log in and see exactly what Social Security has on file for you. You can check your earnings history to make sure it's accurate, because believe it or not, errors do happen. And if your earnings record is wrong, your benefit calculation could be wrong too. You can see your current benefit amount any deductions being taken out, and any notices sent to you. This is the single best tool you have to protect yourself from all of the mistakes we've talked about today. Because knowledge really is the difference between being blindsided and being prepared. Before we move on, I want to ask you something because I always like to know who's actually sitting on the other side of this screen with me. Are you already collecting Social Security right now, or are you still a few years out and just trying to get ahead of all this before it becomes your reality? Drop that in the comments because it genuinely helps me shape what I cover in future videos, and honestly, I just like knowing who I'm talking to. Now, let's talk about a mistake that happens even earlier in the process, before a single dollar ever gets withheld or clawed back, and that's the decision of when to actually claim your benefit in the first place. I hear this all the time. Someone turns 62, they become eligible, and they figure, well, why wait? It's my money. I earned it. I might as well start taking it now. And look, for some people, that's absolutely the right call, especially if you need the income or you have health concerns that make waiting risky. But here's what a lot of people don't fully understand. Claiming before your full retirement age doesn't just delay a few payments, it permanently reduces your monthly benefit for the rest of your life. Not temporarily, not until some later adjustment kicks in like we talked about with the earnings test. Permanently. Claim at 62 instead of your full retirement age, and you could be locking in a benefit that's 25, even 30% smaller than what you would have received by waiting. And if you wait even longer, all the way until 70, your benefit keeps growing past full retirement age too, sometimes by 8% a year. That's a guaranteed return that's honestly hard to beat anywhere else in this economy. Now, I'm not sitting here telling you that everyone should wait until 70. Your health, your family history, your immediate financial needs, all of that matters. And only you can weigh those factors for your own life. But the mistake isn't claiming early. The mistake is claiming early without ever running the numbers, without ever sitting down and asking, what does this decision actually cost me over the next 20 or 30 years of my life? Too many people treat this like a formality, like it's the same as signing up for a rewards card, when in reality it might be one of the single biggest financial decisions of their entire retirement. And this gets even more complicated when we bring spouses into the picture. If you're married or if you've been widowed, there are spousal and survivor benefits that interact with your own benefit in ways that trip up even people who think they've done their homework. A spouse can sometimes claim a benefit based on their partner's earnings record instead of their own, and depending on the numbers, that can actually be the smarter move. Survivors have their own set of rules too, and the timing of when a surviving spouse claims their benefit can make a real difference in how much they receive for the rest of their life. I've heard from widows who claimed a reduced survivor benefit right away without realizing they had other options on the table, and by the time they found out, the decision had already been locked in. This is one of those areas where it really pays to sit down, either with a knowledgeable advisor or by digging through the official resources yourself before you make that claim. Because once you file, undoing it isn't always simple. Let me bring this back down to earth for a second, because I know all of this can feel like a lot to take in at once. Let's talk about what this actually looks like for a real person. Imagine someone, let's just call her a retiree, who claimed her benefits a little early because she needed the income, but she also picked up some part-time work at a local shop to help make ends meet. She didn't realize there was an earnings limit, so she just kept working her regular hours all year without a second thought. Come the following year, she gets a letter saying she was overpaid, and now her monthly check is going to be reduced until that overpayment gets settled. That's not a made-up horror story to scare you. That is an incredibly common situation. And it happens because nobody sat her down and explained the rule in plain language before she started working. If she had known the limit ahead of time, she could have adjusted her hours, planned around it, or at the very least, known what to expect instead of being blindsided by a letter in the mail. Or think about a retired teacher who spent 30 years in the classroom, paid into a pension system instead of Social Security for most of that career, but also worked other jobs earlier in life where Social Security taxes were withheld. For years, that person might have been told, don't even bother applying. Your pension will wipe out most or all of what you get from Social Security anyway. And now, with those old penalty rules gone, that same person might actually be entitled to a benefit they were told never to expect. If they never go back and check, they could be leaving real money on the table simply because the information they had was outdated. These are the kinds of stories that motivate me to keep making these videos. Because behind every one of these rules is a real person trying to make ends meet, trying to enjoy the retirement they worked their whole life for, and getting tripped up, not because they did anything wrong, but because the system is genuinely hard to navigate without someone walking you through it. There's one more thing I want to mention before we get into your action plan, because it ties everything we've talked about together. A lot of the pain in these stories doesn't come from the rules themselves. It comes from the silence around them. Nobody sends you a friendly heads up before you accidentally cross an earnings limit. Nobody calls you to say, hey, you might want to double check your Medicare premium before it jumps. You usually find out after the fact, when the check is already smaller, when the letter is already in your mailbox, when the damage is already done. That's exactly why I keep coming back to this same message video after video. Check your own account, read your own notices, ask your own questions. Don't wait for someone else to catch the mistake for you, because in a system this big, serving this many millions of people, nobody is watching your individual situation as closely as you are. I also want to say this clearly because I don't want anyone leaving this video feeling more anxious than when they arrived. None of this is meant to scare you away from claiming benefits, working part-time, or enjoying your retirement. Social Security is there for you because you earned it, decade after decade of paychecks, decade after decade of contributions. The goal here isn't to make you afraid of the system, it's to make you confident enough to use it wisely. A little bit of awareness, spending just a few minutes checking a number or reading a notice, is often the difference between a retirement that flows smoothly and one that gets interrupted by an unexpected letter in the mail. So let's talk about what you can actually do, starting today, to protect yourself from all of this. First, if you're collecting benefits before full retirement age and you're working in any capacity, go find out exactly what the earnings limit is this year and keep track of your income throughout the year so you don't accidentally cross it without realizing. Second, if anything in your life changes, your income, your address, your marital status, your living situation, report it to Social Security promptly instead of waiting for them to find out on their own. Third, if you're a higher earner, keep an eye on how your income might affect your Medicare premiums a couple of years down the road, and know that there are ways to appeal an adjustment if it was caused by a one-time event. Fourth, think seriously about whether you should have taxes withheld directly from your Social Security check so you're not caught off guard every spring. Fifth, if you or a loved one worked in public service and were told your Social Security would be reduced because of a pension, go check on that right now because the rules have changed and you might be owed money. And finally, set up your own online account directly through the official Social Security channel so you always have accurate, real-time information at your fingertips instead of relying on rumors, guesswork, or worse, a scammer pretending to help you. I know this was a lot to cover, and if you're still with me right now, I genuinely appreciate you sticking around, because this is exactly the kind of information that so many people wish someone had told them before it was too late. That's really the whole mission behind this channel. I'm not trying to overwhelm you with fear. I'm trying to arm you with the kind of plain, practical knowledge that lets you sleep a little easier at night, knowing you're not going to get blindsided by a rule nobody bothered to explain to you. If any part of this resonated with you, if you recognized yourself, or maybe a parent, a spouse, a neighbor in any of these situations, do me a favor and drop a comment down below. Tell me which one of these caught you off guard the most, or if you've already been through something like this yourself. I read every single comment, and honestly, some of the best topics for future videos come directly from you, all sharing your own experiences. And if you found this helpful, it would mean a lot to me if you hit that like button right now, because it genuinely helps this video reach more people who need to hear it, people who might be sitting exactly where you were a few minutes ago, not knowing any of this. If you're new here, go ahead and subscribe and make sure you tap that notification bell too, because Social Security rules change more often than most people realize, and I want to make sure you're the first to know whenever something new comes out that could affect your benefits. Stick around till the very end of these videos too, because I always try to save a practical tip or resource for the folks who make it all the way through. One last thing before I let you go. If you've got a parent, a neighbor, a friend from church, anyone in your life who's on Social Security right now, think about sending them this video. So much of what causes real financial pain for seniors isn't some dramatic scandal, it's just quiet, ordinary confusion, the kind that spreads because nobody talks about it openly. You sharing this with one person could be the exact thing that saves them from opening a letter they weren't expecting. That's really what this whole channel is built around. Taking the confusing, jargon-heavy world of Social Security and breaking it down into something a real person, over a cup of coffee at their kitchen table, could actually understand and use. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. Take care of yourself, take care of your check, and I will see you in the next one.